All right. And welcome back to Comic Conversations, comic book fans. My name is Jordan Clays here on behalf of Lousy With, and I am very excited to be joined by co-creator of the Silver Coin and the artist, Michael Walsh. Michael, how are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you for having me, Jordan.
Hey, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. Now, for anyone who may not already be familiar, Michael is, of course, an Eisner Award-winning Canadian comic book creator based out of Hamilton, the Hammertown, Ontario. In 2013, he co-created the Image comic Comeback, soon to be a major motion picture. He's also done titles for Marvel Comics, including Star Wars, Spider-Man, The Avengers, and he even teamed up with the Lousy With fan favorite Jeff Lemire for the Black Hammer Justice League crossover. And here today, we're talking about the Silver Coin.
Yes, we are.
So, Michael, Thursday, day after issue 4 release, how are you feeling right now?
I'm feeling great. There's been a lot of positive feedback regarding the 4th issue, which I was very curious to see because it's a big shakeup in the series. I think people weren't expecting to go so far into the future and to integrate so many hard sci-fi elements into the universe of Silver Coin, but I was really excited to do something big and different compared to the other issues, which have totally all been very similar.
Yeah, most definitely. And just to kind of bring people up to speed, like we were saying, this is issue 4 in this kind of new ongoing horror anthology that you've created or co-created, I should say. And every issue is a different, basically you're teaming up with a different writer, Chip Zdarsky, Kelly Thompson, your pal Ed Brisson, and then as we just mentioned, of course, Jeff Lemire. So I guess the best place for us to start is perhaps right at the beginning. And if you don't mind, maybe telling us about where the idea come from or how this kind of concept came to be.
Yeah, no problem. I had been wanting to do a strictly horror book within the comic book industry for quite a while. And I had pitched a few things that kind of fizzled out or there was interest, but people didn't think that they would work in the schedule at the time. And I was just about wrapping up Black Hammer Justice League with Jeff, and I was trying to figure out what my next project was going to be. And I had been thinking for a long time about moving out of work for hire and starting to do some of my own creator owned again, because I'd been doing work at Marvel and DC for 6 or 7 years at that point, and it had been quite a long time since I had done a creator owned project. So as I was kind of hemming and hawing about a few different offers and conceptualizing some ideas that I wanted to pitch, I thought, well, maybe I could do something small and have it be a hard horror book, a creator owned, and I could get a bunch of my favorite collaborators that I've worked with before and get them involved, make it a guaranteed easy pickup for Image because of the recognition of all of the names attached, and do something that was just going to be an absolute blast to draw. And as I started trying to conceptualize an idea that would connect all the stories and have this one self-contained universe where yes, it's anthology style and each issue can be read individually, but at the same time readers are really rewarded for reading every single issue because there's a lot of connections and some characters crossover between issues, and slowly there's a bit of a mystery box element. Slowly details about the coin and origins of the coin and its abilities are being revealed throughout the series. But at first, it was just kind of this idea of I needed a Tales from the Crypt type character to connect everything together. And I had this idea of a cursed object, the coin, connecting everything and being the instigator for all of these horrible events. So when I approached each writer, they were all people that I had collaborated with over the last few years. I was just coming off Black Hammer Justice League with Jeff, and I didn't want to stop working with him because he's one of the greatest collaborators ever, because he's an artist and he's a writer. So he knows exactly how much real estate is available on each page. And he is an artist's writer, I guess you could say, because he writes scripts geared towards creating the best art that could possibly be made from that script. It's not a script that's incredibly dense with writing, and it's not verbose. It says exactly what needs to be said, and it is very visual in the way that things are described. So he's an ideal collaborator, I think, from an artist's point of view. But so I wanted to keep working with Jeff. I had done Spectacular Spider-Man, an issue with Chip, and it was only one issue, and I adored that experience. I adored that issue we did. It's one of my favorite things I've ever done. So I said, I want to keep working with Chip. I loved my time working with Kelly on Hawkeye. And then Ed Brisson, he's somebody that I cut my teeth with. My very first book in comics I did with Ed was Comeback. And we've been very, very close friends ever since then. I think sometimes you develop a relationship with somebody that you break into the industry with, and those relationships are really lasting because you go through something together that is very impactful on your life and on the future of your life. So me and Ed have been kind of connected in a really special way since we first met and started working together. And I was really itching to work with him again because it'd been so long. So once I approached everyone and they all said yes, and I pretty much said to them, there's a coin, somebody has to find the coin, and then really bad things happen, and they can be supernatural things. They don't have to be. It can just be horrible things in their lives. And then at the end of the issue, the coin passes hands into another person, and that will set up the next issue, right? So at first it was very, very open, and the writers were completely free to bring these characters and to tell stories that they wanted to tell. But as I started getting scripts in and I started sharing them with the other writers, everyone started kind of connecting things together, and it became this unintentional, I don't even know how to explain it. It became this shared universe of this think tank of ideas and horrible things. And as that was going on, I started thinking more and more about the coin and its origins and how we were going to develop the coin itself as a character. And I started drawing things in issues that weren't in the script to connect them even more, like the Crow, who you're going to get to see a lot more of in issue 5, is one of the through lines throughout all the issues. And the Crow kind of moves the coin around a little bit and interacts with some characters. And you don't know who the Crow is yet, but its relationship to the coin will be revealed in time. The Crow's name is Duncan, by the way, for anybody who's curious about that. But yeah, so it kind of is just an experiment, honestly, that was supposed to be this little small, fun, done in one 5-issue project that just kept growing and growing, and everyone was having so much fun with, and I was having a blast drawing. It's the most fun I've ever had working on a comic book, and it's one of the most rewarding experiences I've ever had, because I feel like I'm the showrunner, and I'm kind of pushing writers in directions and getting them to kind of move towards a bigger story that I want to tell in the future. And at the same time, my art is the thing that is also connecting it, because I'm drawing each issue. There's a visual continuity in the story that I think is really working. And yeah, so sales were really, really strong. And with sales as they were, I talked to Eric at Image, and we were able to announce that we're extending the series to an ongoing. And then for the second arc, I decided to approach writers that I hadn't worked with any of these writers, but I have long-standing relationships with them, and I'm a huge fan of their work as a reader of the medium. I'm a huge reader of comics as well. And so they were all just people that I was really excited to work with. I've been friends with Matt Rosenberg since I just broke into the industry. We were people that kind of came up together. Ram is somebody who's a little bit newer, but whose work has really floored me over the last few years. Vita, again, been friends with Vita for a very long time, and their writing has really just wowed me, especially on the X-Men stuff and a lot of their newer stuff that they have coming up in the pipeline. And then Josh Williamson, again, a guy who I love, Birthright, Nailbiter, 2 of my favorite books. And he's someone that I've been talking with Josh about doing creator own for probably 6 years. And it's just, the timing has never worked out. So these are all people that I've been trying to work with unsuccessfully for years. And it's finally, I was able to bring them all on board this project. And I'm really excited for the stories that they're going to tell, because I think that they're very distinct and unique from the first arc. So it's super exciting. And then again, I'm writing the 5th issue and the 10th issue. So I'm capping each arc with a really heavy mythology issues that keep building out the world and the canon within the Silver Coin universe.
I was going to say that there's literally so much to literally just unpack with what you just dropped there. That sounds absolutely freaking fantastic. The fact, like the idea of you and Joshua Williamson working together, like you were saying, Nailbiter is one of my like near and dear to my heart. So to see what you guys would be able to spin out, I can't even begin to imagine.
Oh,
And
his issue is so fun, and I don't know. I'll just say it because it's a creator-owned book. I can say whatever I want to say, but we've got a variant cover by James Herron for his issue, and James is one of my favorite artists working in comics today. I think he has this crazy kinetic energy that not a lot of people can do. You know, I think there's James Herron and Daniel Warren Johnson that are doing this crazy action-packed, kinetic, hyper hyper movement to every single character, and their inking is just incredibly dynamic. It's really special stuff, and just getting to collaborate with James a little bit has been really fun just on that cover alone. So it makes me want to bring in some more artists as well. But I think I'll stay as the sole interior artist for now and just keep hiring amazing people for the variant covers.
Yeah. No, I completely understand what you're saying. Now, I wanted to just kind of touch on something that you mentioned there, because obviously, like you said, you're going to be writing issue 5, you're going to be writing issue 10. So like you had mentioned, you didn't really have a set kind of story or arc other than kind of loosely giving, your writers like an idea of where they could potentially run with it. That being said, do you have, or have you always had for that matter, an idea of how things end or will potentially end?
Well, I kind of did. I did. And then Jeff said, hey, I want to do my issue in the year 2467. And that kind of squashed my early idea for an ending. But I really do like that keeps things completely open. So with the coin still in existence 400 years from now, that means that, the story really is never going to end. And I think that says something, and that there is a bit of thematic relevance to the idea that, violence is cyclical and it doesn't end, and horrible things kind of come back in the end. Always they circle around when you do an awful thing. So I think that there is some really interesting things to unpack if you think about that. But I do have endings for recurring characters in mind. I think in issue 5, which is the next issue that'll be coming out a month from now, a month Wednesday, that issue is going to introduce a few characters that you've seen in the shadows and other issues, and it's going to explain some things that have been maybe thought of as just dramatic imagery up to this point. But everything that I've integrated into the story has a reason. There's a reason there, and has a story. So I think you're going to see a lot of that come up in issue 5, and then even more further down the road.
Now, another thing I wanted to bring up that you had mentioned, because you described something that I think is really neat that you don't normally see, in that it's an artistic continuity throughout. The writers are changing, the art is essentially staying the same. That being said, someone like Jeff Lemire or even Zdarsky, who are artists in and of themselves, I would think that maybe, did you ever have a moment where you're like, okay, I need to stop writing what I think, or drawing how I think Jeff or Chip might draw, and stick to kind of myself? Or was there any sort of, was it harder to draw for any other writer, I guess is what I'm trying to say, than others were?
Not specifically. I think when writers are a little bit more verbose and more descriptive in their text, sometimes they overwrite how many beats can fit in the page, and that can be a little bit more difficult when you have to figure out what is important and what can I cut out of the descriptive text within the script, because you have to really find what is the most important element. Because if a writer says, there's this sign that says this thing, there's these 3 trees in the back, and there's this one guy and he's blowing bubble gum in the background, you might have to cut the guy blowing bubble gum in the background. But at the same time, a few pages later, it might say, oh, the guy blowing bubble gum does this thing. So that was actually an important element that you missed. So sometimes there's scripts where they're a little bit more dense and you have to unpack a little bit more. And those are more time consuming, but they're also quite fun. Of the writers in the first arc, I would say Kelly probably is the most, has the most going on in her scripts. And she writes a lot of panels per page, a lot more panels per page than some of the other people. But I mean, I love working with Kelly. Clearly, I've worked with her extensively on Hawkeye, and I'd love to work with her again after Silver Coin. So It's not really that anything is more difficult than the other, but it's just that some things are more time consuming. Jeff's issue was quite time consuming, actually, because I don't know if you saw this, but he mentioned today on Twitter that we did his issue Marvel style, because as he was like just about to start in on his issue, he started getting really wrapped up in the Sweet Tooth stuff. So he didn't have a lot of time to sit down and script it all. So he did a rough plot of his issue. I drew it all out and I put in rough dialogue just so that I was making sure that I was leaving enough room in certain panels. And then I sent him the art for the issue, and then he did the script after the art was done. So it was a really interesting way of working, and that's how a lot of the Marvel stuff worked early on, which is why people would call it Marvel style these days. Or I think more accurately, you could just say it's open style or plot script, something like that. But it was a really open style. But because of the nature of that, that means that I have to take a small paragraph and then blow that out into 3 or 4 pages and try and make it coherent and give enough character. So it was a really interesting exercise, and I feel like me and Jeff really kind of connected in our ideas about storytelling throughout the process. So it was really fun to work that way.
Yeah. And, even before you mentioned anything about that, you can definitely tell, as you mentioned, aside from the fact that it's set 400 years in the future, there is a definite change as far as what is driving the story. I would say that it's kind of like, there is a healthy balance, issues 1 through 3, but in 4, it really seems like you're the one who's driving the bus and kind of making it go. And it was interesting to kind of see that approach, to say the very least.
Yeah, I think as I was working on this issue, I was thinking this is going to be by far the most divisive issue of the first arc for sure. And I kind of really like that about it, because I like work that is challenging. I like art that is challenging, and I really love the ideas that Jeff had about the future of this world and how the coin connects to it all. And we're gonna keep going back to that future, I hope, in the future. And me and Jeff were just talking today about maybe some plans to go back there a few arcs down the road if we're able to get there. But yeah, we've got some cool cyberpunk, techno horror, body horror stories to tell in 2467, hopefully.
And well, I mean, obviously this is a horror book. I mean, I don't think that's a secret to anyone, but what I've also kind of come to discover from digging into your work is that like horror seems to be a real driving force as far as your creative process is concerned. I stumbled upon your web comic, The Sleep Stories, and that was terrifying, absolutely terrifying. Like some of that stuff was so like it just felt so raw and real. The one the corner man, the guy who snakes behind the walls and hides in the shadows, like that kept me up for 2 days. And I read something, or I heard you say something, that when you were young, you were like tortured with nightmares. Is that correct?
Yeah. I've had night terrors pretty much all my life. I have a pretty wild imagination, as you can guess, as an artist. And I was always drawing, always reading and watching movies, and it would come back to me in my sleep all the time. I would sleepwalk, I would scream, and I've had night terrors my whole life. I went through some traumatic stuff when I was a kid, so I had PTSD, and that really enhanced them and affected them for years and years. And I still have them to this day. And that's what The Sleep Stories is all about, really. It's essentially a journal that it's a comic book journal. I'm drawing out my nightmares and recording them as they happen, and sharing them with the world. And it was another project that I just did on a spur of the moment. I figured I'd draw one of my dreams that I had a few nights ago, and or a few nights before I started, and I posted it on Twitter, and it blew up. It went viral. So I thought, well, there's obviously an audience for this. People really are interested in these things that I thought were these little personal anecdotes. So I did a few more, and every one of them really blew up on social media. So I started a dedicated website to them, and it's thesleepstories.com, and I've been posting them sporadically there. Work on Silver Coin and some of the other things I'm working on has been really intensive over the last few months. So I've kind of taken The Sleep Stories has taken a back seat for now, but I've got a bunch of scripts logged for them when I do have a little bit more time again. Hopefully this fall I'll be able to get back to the sleep stories and do a bunch of new stories.
Well, definitely looking forward to that. And I also think it's interesting, how, you're able to take something that would be kind of crippling and a negative for so many people, and to kind of rework that into like a creative art form as a way of like purging that fear, I think is really interesting, and also not something that you see very often, to be quite honest.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of, I mean, people talk about art therapy all the time, but I think people use art for catharsis a lot, especially in painting and the fine art world. But yeah, I guess I just got really personal and spilled some demons, and people enjoyed it.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with you. Now, I know that you released volume 1 as a Kickstarter. Is that correct?
I did, yes. Yeah.
And I know, like, as you just mentioned, obviously Silvercoin is taking precedent right now, but down the road, do you see yourself releasing like volume 2 via Kickstarter, or would you want to take something like that to like a place like Image, for example?
I think the plan right now is to do a volume 2 on Kickstarter. And then once I have enough material for what would be a third volume, then I would probably release that on as just a trade paperback collection at Image or whatever publisher, probably Image. I have a really good relationship with them. They've been great with Silvercoin, and I'm talking to them about some future stuff as well. So I think I'll be working with Image for the foreseeable future right now. They've been a really, really great help with Silvercoin and getting it to where it's at now.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's fantastic stuff to hear. Yeah. One thing I wanted to just take a quick left turn if we can, because again, like I was kind of going through your Twitter, your social media and stuff like that, just trying to get a feel for you. And, I find some things that I'm like, oh, that's interesting, or that's, confusing, whatever. So one question I wanted to ask you, why are horses hard to draw?
I don't know what it is, but every artist in the world will tell you that there's something challenging about horses. And I think it's kind of that they are easy to make creepy because there's so much muscle and sinew in the structure of their body, and their teeth, when they have an open mouth, they're so strange and misshapen. And they have such lifelike and expressive eyes. They're just a very hard, they're a difficult animal to capture. So for me, I think embracing the creepiness in the horses really lends itself to good drawing for me. I draw a lot of those really veiny bits and those protruding, almost tumor-like muscles that they have. And I try and give them creepy, dark eyes that illuminate under any light. So it's there. I find them fun to draw once I kind of found my path. But if I had to draw a nice, friendly horse, it would probably be kind of difficult. No nice, friendly horses in my
nice, friendly horses. No, I just had to ask you that because I saw that and I was like, okay, I absolutely have to know.
Oh yeah, I ask any comic book artist, what are the hardest things to draw? They'll say horses, bicycles, and maybe cars. I mean, cars are quite difficult. With 3D modeling now, it's a lot easier to find good reference. But I remember early in my career when I wasn't familiar with any of that software, it was really hard to draw cars from different angles if you had to draw a specific car.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, those are some of the more time-consuming, difficult things. Anything you have to do a lot of research for is always difficult.
Right. Now, you are kind of an interesting guest because you, like myself, like I'm in London. I'm not too far from you. I'm literally just down the road. So it's interesting to speak with not just a fellow Canadian, but a fellow Ontarian, because there are certain things that just, if you're not from here, you don't understand it, or you wouldn't know about it. And being that you're a big horror buff, a big horror fan, I have to ask, or at least assume, did you grow up watching Are You Afraid of the Dark or Goosebumps or anything like that?
Oh yeah, those were very formative shows in my childhood, especially Are You Afraid of the Dark? I think that the Goosebumps TV show came out a little I was a little aged out when that started coming out, but I did read a ton of the Goosebumps books. So I was, because this show came out a few years after all the books were coming out, and I was kind of into a little bit more mature material by that time. But yeah, I grew up loving Are You Afraid of the Dark? That was one of my favorite shows, and it terrified me. I was such a sensitive kid, and I already had nightmares and night terrors. My parents didn't like me watching it before bed, but I was so engrossed by the show that I couldn't help myself. If I was looking for something to watch and I found it on, I would always watch it. And I really frustrated my parents. And I would sneak watch X-Files sometimes in the mid to and early 90s. And it was so scary for me. And my parents were so mad at me every time I did it. But it just always pulled me in, anything that can really have you invested and enthralled and eyes wide open watching it, getting excited about the next monster or the next jump, that stuff really excites me as a reader and as a viewer, a consumer, I guess, of art.
Yeah, no, and I couldn't agree with you more. I was the exact same way. I would get in trouble for watching it because it's like it keeps you up all night. Like, why would you do this to yourself? But yeah, man, and still some of those episodes, I think about like the Crimson Clown and the vampire in the hospital and just some of these things where, and oddly enough, when I was reading Silver Coin for the first time, I thought back to that one episode where it's not like the eagle's claw or the monkey's paw, it's the eagle's claw, that, you know what I mean? And I was like, oh, that kind of idea of the cursed object, like you said, making its way through different hands in different generations. It just really kind of resonated with me. And I was like, okay, if anyone's going to know about Are You Afraid of the Dark, it's going to be Michael Walsh, to say the least.
Oh yeah, that was one of my favorites growing up. I liked the episode where the kid steals the clown's cigar. It was like
his
Zabo,
nose. He takes his nose.
Or his nose. That's right, his nose. And the clown's going through the house. That was a really good one. There was the one with the sunglasses that was clearly, I hadn't seen They Live at the time, but it was clearly a play on They Live, where when you put on the sunglasses, you see all these figures moving around your house and stuff. That one creeped me out so bad. The one where there was somebody under the bed that would pull them into another dimension. And I remember me and my sister watched that one with the person under the bed pulling them into this other dimension. And there was like a castle in there, if I remember correctly. The next morning I had woke up for school earlier than her, and I went under her bed and I was trying to scare her. And so I was just waiting for her to get up so that when she stepped down, I would grab her ankles and scare her, because we were always scaring each other when we were kids. And she stepped down from the bed and I grabbed onto her ankles. She started screaming, but she started stomping on my hands as hard as she could. So I started screaming and crying. And then my parents came in and I'm sitting there with these crumpled hands crying, and I'm the one getting in trouble. It was the worst morning ever of my childhood life. Well, no, it wasn't the worst, but it was a funny morning. Yeah.
But yeah, definitely a prank gone wrong, to say the least.
Yeah, yes, definitely.
Have you?
I haven't thought about that in a long time. I haven't thought about Are You Afraid of the Dark in a long time. But it's funny that you say that and bring it up, because the idea of this anthology style horror story that I'm so in love with, it could subconsciously all go back to that, because that's such a formative part of your consciousness, that a show like that I was so in love with really weasels its way into your tastes and the things that you enjoy. And maybe Silver Coin only exists because of Are You Afraid of the Dark? So
oh boy. The tales from the Midnight Society come through and help give us the Silver Coin. That's something right there. But one other thing. Oh yeah, one other thing I did want to ask you here, just again, going back to a few of the things that I've seen on your social media, because again, I obviously understand that you're bit of a horror movie buff, or at least that's what I've kind of been able to discern going through some of your posts. So I'm going to give you 5 and you can keep 3 and you let me know what these 3 are. So these, like, it's Halloween night. You've got 3 movies to watch. You tell me which 3 from these. Okay. Aliens, The Fly, The Shining, The Thing, and Hellraiser.
I feel like those are 5 movies that I just mentioned.
They may or may not have been.
Twitter. Yeah. So I think The Fly is one of my favorites, because I really do like body horror and I really like Jeff Goldblum. I like horror movies that have really cool creature design and also really strong character work. And I think that Jeff Goldblum is such an enigmatic actor. I can watch him all the time, and his performance in that movie is so incredibly interesting to me. It's just such a good movie aside from its horror elements, and it has a lot to say, and it's something that I can watch over and over. I probably watched that, more than any other horror movie in the last 10 years. So The Fly for sure. I think The Shining is probably the best movie objectively on that list, but it's not a movie I can watch all the time because it is pretty long and it's pretty tasking mentally, because it is so dark, and it feels a little bit more real than some of the other ones. So I think I'll take that out.
Okay.
So The Fly, and then you said Alien, Hellraiser.
Oh, so sorry. Yes, I did not. I misspoke. I said aliens, but I meant Alien, because
Alien, Hellraiser, and
The Thing.
I love Alien so much, and that one is almost, I guess it is a horror, but it has so many sci-fi and thriller elements that I feel like it almost defies classification. But it is one of my favorites. Again, I think Hellraiser is maybe the most schlocky of all of those movies, but I just love the designs so much. So let's go with The Fly, Alien, and The Thing.
That's a good 3 right there.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to go with. And The Thing, I like, again, for some of the same elements as The Fly, in that it has this amazing creature design, but at the same time, it's got great performances, great character actors. And I really like the idea of not knowing if somebody is an alien or out to get you. And there's this real animosity and tension between the characters in that I think is so successful.
All right.
So yeah, those are my 3.
I like it.
That's what I got. Yeah.
I like it. Now, if we can, just because, as you can tell, I'm a bit sporadic and when I'm jumping all over the place with you here, but because I can kind of see those 2 beauties over your right shoulder there, your bass, and what is that? Is that a Telecaster, if I'm not mistaken?
It is. Yes, it is. It is.
So one of the things that I loved about the Silver Coin issue 1 is when there's the scene where he's kind of picking up the coin, or when they're about to jam. And he's like, oh, I don't have a pick. And then the one band member's like, oh, just use a coin. And immediately I'm like, oh, man, this guy's definitely a musician, because the amount of times that I have not had a pick in my entire life where it's like, oh, okay, I'll just use a coin. And who cares if I scratch up my strings or if I, damage my guitar or whatever. But I also heard that you were a touring musician back in the day. Is that true?
A little bit, yeah. I did an East Coast Canada tour with the band that I was playing in. I was playing guitar and singing, and we were young and naive and thought we were going to be the biggest rock stars Canada. Well, not really, but we thought we had the stuff to make a living it, and it's just so difficult and so frustrating, and it made me like the music less and like playing less, being too ambitious about it. And I'm a very ambitious person, and I always am thinking about like the next stage and how to be better and how to do more and be more successful and to tell a better story, to write a better song. And it was becoming too it wasn't a fun hobby anymore. It had become something else, and I wasn't enjoying it in the same way. So I kind of took a step back from it for a little while. I still play music all the time. I'm playing bass in a band with some buddies, just like a basement rock band now, but I'm not. I think for me, music is more fun when I don't take it too seriously.
I got you. That's fair enough. What was the name of your old band, just out of curiosity?
We were called Slides. We were kind of heavy rock. If you mixed like Radiohead and something like heavy from like the late 90s. So like My Bloody Valentine and Radiohead or something like that. So we did like a big wall of guitar driven rock, but then the singing was more melodic and more dissonant.
Okay. No, I just wanted to ask because back in the day, again, when I was kind of in my late teens, early 20s, same thing. A few friends of mine, we, packed up our stuff and went out east. So I was wondering if we ever perhaps crossed paths or anything like that.
We could have, you never know. Yeah. I only did the one big tour, but it was a blast. I mean, I loved playing shows so much. I just kind of got a little bit burnt out.
Mm-hmm.
And I started getting more successful within the comics industry and actually making a living doing it. And it just kind of pushed that kind of to the back seat.
Okay, fair enough. I was going to say, I think clearly it was the right decision at the end of the day. Now that this is actually a nice little segue since we're on the topic of music. There's another thing I wanted to ask you just from something I saw on your social media. Only this time around, I'm not going to ask you to tell me which of these films is your favorite. I'm going to ask you to tell me which of these films has the best score. So,
okay.
Jurassic Park, Star Wars.
Oh, geez.
Or The NeverEnding Story.
Well, which Star Wars?
You can do Imperial theme or like whatever one you want, whatever one. Vader or just kind of A New Hope theme.
I mean, I think that the Jurassic Park score is so good. The scores in the Star Wars movies are a little bit more iconic, I think. But I think that Star Wars, each movie introduces a new theme in the score. And some of the best stuff is even actually in the prequels. I forget what it's called, but the music that's playing as Maul is fighting Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon. What's that called? But that is one of the best parts of Star Wars's themes matching up with the action in all of Star Wars history. I mean, I don't love the prequels. I'm a huge Star Wars nerd, but if you took the music from every Star Wars movie and put it together, and even the newer stuff, I love Kylo Ren's theme and I love Rey's theme. I think they're both really cool and really different from the older Star Wars stuff. If you put all of the Star Wars music together, it's unbeatable. But if you have to pick one movie, I just think the Jurassic Park from beginning to end is such a strong piece of film scoring.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll say that. You know what's also really good is Hook. If we're talking John Williams, Hook's score is so good.
Hook is a fantastic film.
Yeah, I watched it the other day for the first time in many, many years, and made me well up just thinking about all the good memories watching it as a kid.
Oh man, can't fly, can't fight, can't crow. Oh, it's just and you want to talk about a movie that had like when I saw that as a kid, the scene where Hook comes in and he like unlocks, that scared the crap out of me when I was a kid. I ran
out of the theater. I went and saw that with some cousins, and I was so terrified when he is dragging his Hook up the wall and he's about to kidnap the children. I started crying and freaking out, and I just took off. I was like, I can't watch this anymore, and I just ran down the theater. And one of the adults had to take me out and play in the arcade while everybody else finished the movie. But what can you do?
Oh, exactly. Here, actually, you know what? You want to hear a fun Hook fact since we're on the subject? Did you know? Remember the scene where that's also freaking terrifying when he puts the guy in the chest with the scorpions?
In the boo box. Yeah, that's Glenn Close, right?
Oh, yeah, that's Glenn Close. I was not telling you anything you don't already know. Yeah, I just learned that recently. I was like, oh my gosh, you've got to be kidding me.
That's a great Dustin Hoffman is so good in that scene as Hook. And watching it now, his accent is so odd. You can't even place it as an actual dialect, but it's kind of seems like his own creation, and he does such a good job with that version of Hook. I love that movie very much.
Oh, I could not agree with you more. I'm a little disappointed that The NeverEnding Story didn't get a bit more love from your side of the table, but that's neither here nor there.
I don't know if is the video going to be part of the podcast. Are you posting it on YouTube or anything?
Yeah, we certainly will be.
I don't know if you can see this, but I've got the orange from the NeverEnding Story on my arm. So clearly I'm a big NeverEnding Story fan. It's really a movie that I've seen more than maybe any other movie ever that I've watched, but that was one of those ones that I just watched nightly as a kid, and so much of it still holds up well, especially the creature design and the nothing, and oh, I love that movie. It's one of my plane movies now because it's such comfort food to me.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times when I'm flying home from a convention and I'm just exhausted, usually a little bit hungover, I don't want something that's challenging. I kind of don't want something that I haven't seen before because I don't know if I'll absorb it, and you know, I don't know if I'll catch all the nuances of the film. So a lot of times coming home from cons, I'll put NeverEnding Story on my iPad on the plane, and it really is a comfort food movie for me. It's a special one.
Now, what are your thoughts on the sequel? Are you a NeverEnding Story 1 or 2 kind of guy?
Oh, 1 for sure. I did like 2, and one of the nightmares that I have in the sleep stories, I feel like is a subconscious manifestation of how much number 2 freaked me out when the kid starts losing his memories, when Bastian starts losing his memories in the little balls. I used to have those dreams about, like, I would get this disease and my memories would float out of my head in little balls. And I swear to God, it's residual trauma from watching the NeverEnding Story 2 as a child, and feeling like dementia and losing my memories and losing my intelligence is such a terrifying thing.
I'm with you on that one. There are definitely some scarring images from that film. The weird kind of metallic crab people used to always freak me out too. I just they were scary.
There's even a NeverEnding Story 3, and that one has a young Jack Black in it as the bully character, but that one's hot garbage compared to the other one.
That is bad, isn't it? And it's isn't it the kid from like Free Willy or something like that? Or
it is. It's the kid from Free Willy. Yeah, the first one's the best, hands down. Second one is watchable and has some cool moments, and then third one's doesn't feel like it's worth going back to for me.
No, I hear you. Speaking of, while we're just on the topic of film, what was the last horror movie that you saw that genuinely scared you?
Just the other day I watched Saint Maud, and that was probably my favorite horror movie of this year. It's on Netflix in Canada. I'm sure it's on Netflix worldwide now, but it's about a nurse who works in palliative care, and she's born again, and she went through some very traumatic things working at the hospital, and now she's working on site in people's homes in palliative care, and she's working with someone who is an atheist, and she starts trying to save them, and things get dark and it's terrifying. And I grew up going to Catholic schools, and my grandparents were my grandmother was very religious, so I'm very familiar with Roman Catholic themes and biblical allegory, and so I find those things very interesting, and that movie just really was so effective. The performances were amazing, the score was amazing, and it had a banger of a climax, which I feel like you need to stick the landing in a horror movie, especially horror movies that are kind of slow burns. I feel like if you have a horror movie that's a bit of a slow burn that doesn't stick the ending, it's hard to really appreciate it. But a movie like Saint Maud, once you see it, if you get a chance to watch it, I highly recommend it. It's probably my favorite horror movie this year, with Possessor Uncut being a close runner-up, the new Brandon Cronenberg film. But yeah, Saint Maud, it's kind of got the same pacing as something like The Witch, where there's this uncomfortable uneasiness throughout the entire movie, and you're just waiting for the ball to drop. And like The Witch, it has a real banger of an ending. So I highly recommend that if you like disturbing, hurt your soul horror.
That's the only kind I watch. So yeah, that's perfect. That's perfect. Well, you know what, Michael, we've been chatting a while now here, and I guess a good way to kind of wrap things up here, if we can circle back to the silver coin with issue 4 out on shelves, 5 is upcoming. What do we have to look forward to? What can you kind of tell us about this, first wrapping, or the wrapping of this first arc, rather?
Well, the 5th issue comes out next month. It's a very important issue to the mythology, and we're going to go back to the late 1600s when the coin was first minted. And I don't want to say too much more than that, but there's going to be a lot of imagery that you've seen throughout the first 4 issues that will be, you're going to see the beginnings of those things. And some of those characters developed a little bit here in issue 5. And then looking forward, we've got August, September off. And then October will be the release of the trade paperback. And then we'll be back for issue 6 in November. And that'll be with Josh Williamson. And that issue is going to be, that one's really near and dear to me because it's about a kid in a mall arcade in the 90s. And that's kind of where I grew up, in Eastgate Mall in Hamilton, in the arcade, playing Street Fighter 2 Turbo and Marvel vs. Capcom and Mortal Kombat, all the fighting games. And so it's about a kid who likes the arcade, likes playing horror-themed fighting games, and may or may not find the silver coin. So I feel like from that little description, you can kind of guess where things are going to go. But it's really cool, and it's been really fun to develop that with Josh. And then coming up in the following issues, we've got Rom V is taking us to Las Vegas. We've got Vida bringing us to New York in the 70s. And then we've got Matt Rosenberg bringing us to New York in the 60s. So we've got kind of 2 issues that are going to play off each other a lot with Vida and Matt's, which is going to be really fun because they're buddies and they can hang out together in New York and kind of bounce things off of each other. So those 2 issues are going to be very playful. And then I'm not going to say anything about my issue yet because I have my issue 5 hasn't come out, and it's going to play off that quite a bit. So I'm gonna stay off any spoilers for mine. But we've got a lot of really exciting things coming up in the land of silver coin.
Oh, all great news. It's honestly, like you dropped, I can't even count how many bombs we've dropped during this conversation. So all I can say is just thank you so much for, taking the time to speak with me and to chat about this incredible book. For anyone who has not already caught up on the silver coin, like I was saying, issues 1 through 4 are already out now. You can check out the Sleep Stories, Michael's webcomic, at thesleepstories.com.
Yep.
And then also make sure to follow him on Twitter and Instagram at Mr_Walsh, and that's Mister.
Yes, it is.
And honestly, Michael, it was an absolute pleasure. I wish you nothing but the best, and I look forward to being able to chat again about the second arc.
Yeah, you too. Thanks for having me. Can't wait to chat again.
Anytime. You take care.